Now, it's time for the Neighborhood Connection, sponsored by The Wall.
We had a great toilet question come in. How do you unplug a toilet? But first, we're going to talk about what makes a decent toilet, because you kind of have to understand how this goes so you know how to fix it. So I just took a very inexpensive toilet and cut it right down the middle so you have something to look at. Now here's the key. We all know what the toilet bowl looks like, but many people don't know what it looks like on the inside. So this is what they call the trap here on this. What this does is this is actually kept so you don't get sewer gases and rodents or anything else coming up from the sewer. This is actually a safety mechanism, so it keeps the smell and all those sewer gases out of your house. Now what happens is this is a place that traditionally things get stuck. Maybe it's kids' toys or whatever else went down the toilet. So when you look at a cheap toilet, you'll see that this is a very small area, and that's a problem we had back in the 90s when they went to the 1.6 gallon flush. They didn't really understand how this worked because we had about 3.5 gallons of water. But as soon as they went to that 1.6 gallon flush, we had some problems with this setup. They've come a long way now, so the new toilets are flushing just as good and even better than the old ones. But what happens is when you buy a cheap toilet and you get what you pay for with a toilet, this here, you can see how this has the raw edges on the inside of this. This porcelain only goes so far in. The good toilets these days is all smooth in here, so you don't have any of these rough edges that like to catch things as they go down. And so that's what tends to plug up a toilet. So my thing is, if you've got a 10-year-old or older toilet, maybe it's time to replace it. But if you're stuck where you've got something plugged up in here, the problem is usually in this area. So this is where you want to use a toilet snake. Now, you don't want to use a regular snake because the metal, which is this part right here, will chew and mark this up and it's going to look bad forever. You don't want to ruin the finish on it. So the secret is to use a toilet snake that has this kind of protected area in. So what you'll do is you'll slide this in and get it so it's going around here. And then what happens is once it goes in here, you can start using the snake part and start twisting it. And this will go up and around like this. And so what happens is you'll be able to grab that paper, toy, whatever, and pull it back out. The hook is what grabs it, and that's the key. If you use a regular toilet snake like this, you'll get it 90% of the time without having to remove the bowl. Now, if it's really stuck, yep, you're gonna have to clean this out, take the toilet off the floor, and fix it the right way that way. And maybe at that point, it's time to put in a new toilet. Now, our next question is about painting, and it's painting season, so let's get into some exterior painting tips. Hey guys, I wanted to talk today about exterior painting and exterior paint prep. This is the stuff that you want to do before you start putting that color on your house or shed or whatever you're working outside. Now, the first step I want to see after you've cleaned everything up is get around and start doing some caulking. Now, caulking is the key to keeping the weather outside and the heat and the cold, whatever you want it to be inside. Now, the right caulking is key. You can go out and get the cheapest painter's caulk known to mankind, and you're gonna be doing it every year. Or you can get something like this, which is made by Sashco. It's Big Stretch. This is an elastic style caulking. It will actually stretch and move, and that means it's not gonna split and crack, and that means it's gonna stay on the house. Now, the key with that is to actually have a little bit bigger gap so you can actually fill that in with the caulking, because the more caulking you have in there, the more ability to stretch it has. So a little bit more is better. Now, when it comes to painting and priming outside, the first rule of thumb is the cheapest paint is going to be the most expensive paint, because you're going to probably have to buy twice as much and do twice as work because it just doesn't cover. And then my second rule of thumb is when it says paint and primer in one, it's still paint. You still need to prime. And I have a great example right here. If you look at this pre-primed piece of cedar that I have right here, I can already see the color starting to bleed through. Cedar and these woods like this that are aromatic love to bleed color through, so you got to seal that off. If I paint white over the top of this, you're going to see it time and time again. So the first thing you want to do is prime it, yes, even though it's primed. And the same thing goes for bare wood. Now, finding the right primer is key. There are about 10 different kinds of primer out there, and you want to get the right one. This you want to use as a covering primer, and I'll show you kind of what this stuff does. It is really meant to seal off and, of course, give you some good adhesion while doing it. Now, sometimes, depending on the primer, you can have this tinted, Like for me, I'm gonna be painting this black afterwards. So if I tinted it gray, it's gonna get me a little bit closer, but always check with your favorite paint manufacturer. But this stuff here, you could see how well this stuff covers, and that's gonna give you a good coat. Let's put some primer on this and start going. Now this is actually a cedar trim that's gonna be going around this project I'm working on, but the key with this is I'm gonna pre-paint it and pre-prime it so it's protected, because it's gonna get a lot of weather on it. So I'm just basically getting a really good roller. Good roller is key, just like good brushes. And then we're gonna get a nice solid coat. You can see how well this covers. All right, the first thing though, make sure you're watching the weather. If it's gonna rain for 24 hours afterwards, maybe it's not the best day to start a painting project. This stuff needs to really cure for 24 hours. And also, patience is the key. Watch the can, make sure you follow the rules. If you coat too quickly, you could have a serious problem and it could bubble up and it's not gonna cure right. You only wanna do this once. Now the other thing is if you're spraying it or rolling it, you need to make sure the last thing you do is rolling it out. You wanna back roll if you're spraying, so that way you have that durable finish. That roller, like this one, will actually push the paint into the surface and into the texture, and that means it's gonna adhere better, which means it's gonna last longer. Now, I got a ton of work to do out here. I better get after it. There's some serious painting to do. If you've got a question you'd like me to answer on the show, scan the QR code on your screen now. You may even make it on a future edition of Around the House Northwest.